Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello and welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. My name is Cody Sizemore, and I'm joined here by my lovely co-host, Maria Casillas. And we are going to be talking about something that I am very passionate about today. It's basically like the majority of what I do personally. But before we get into all of that, I want to first and foremost just say, hey, thanks for listening today. Whether it be your first time, whether it be your second time, your 10th time, or maybe even your 160-something time listening, because we've done about that many episodes. We just want to say thank you for being here. We are very happy that you are here. And we want to give a special shout out to those who do listen to us every week, whether it be 2 weeks in a row, 4 weeks in a row, 20 weeks in a row, whatever. You are what we call our every weekers, and you are what we really, really love, because that's who we do it for. You know, it's for the people who listen to one, they like it, they come back for another, and all that kind of jazz. So we just want to say thank you for that. And we've been seeing more and more of those quote unquote every weekers in our Facebook group as well. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I hear them talk about this dang Facebook group all the time, but I just haven't checked it out yet. I don't know why you haven't checked it out, but you probably should. So if you do want to check it out, you can definitely find that on Facebook. All you have to do is just type in the Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits on Facebook and just join there. You know, ask questions. A lot of the stuff that we get for this show is actually from people asking questions, or they, give an update with them what's going on in their own practices. And that's actually something that is going to be happening today. Someone made a post and I was like, I deal with that same thing, and I feel that same way, so I definitely want to talk about it. So with all that being said, welcome back to the show. We're happy to have you. Maria, how you doing?
Yes, I'm doing really well today. Thank you for asking. FYI, I don't know why they are so active today, but I live near an Air Force base, and there are several planes that have been going over even just since you started talking today. So I will do my best to not have that interrupt us. But if it does, I just want our listeners to know I'm very sorry ahead of time. I'm doing well today. Thank you for asking. And I'm excited to have this conversation. I know that this is something that you and I do very, very differently because of the way that we have to run our businesses and how much time and effort and or income that we are relying on from our respective businesses. And so I think this will be a really good conversation for sure.
Yeah. And you make a good point. On my end, I'm like basically the sole breadwinner for my family.
Right.
Like my mom. Sometimes I feel like she's my mom. Sometimes
we will not let her know that you said that.
My wife, she works, but she doesn't really make much of an income. It's part-time. It's really just for the health insurance. That's why she works. So everything that my family pretty much relies on comes from me in coaching. So I spend a lot of time on it, a lot of energy, resources, all that kind of stuff, and that's why this topic in particular is something that's really important to me.
Yeah.
But you're in a different boat, correct?
Yep. It's something that we don't rely on at this point, and it's actually not something that I'm able to devote as much time to either, and that's a very intentional decision that I have made. Having said that, our listeners don't even know what topic we're talking about yet, so we'll make sure that we share that with them.
We just keep dangling the carrot.
I know, right? But having said that, it doesn't mean that I can't do this. I just have to do it at a different level than what you do. So anyone who's listening know that where we're talking about on this scale, you have a spot on that same scale as well.
Yeah. So let's just get into it. Let's give them what they want. They're sitting there on the edge of their seat, just going, what are they talking about today? So here it is. We're going to be talking about prospecting. And in particular, not just prospecting, but really what kind of distracts us from prospecting, and I would say almost convinces ourselves that like, hey, we're doing a lot, so therefore we must be getting new clients left and right and all these different results. But really it's the stuff that distracts us that we think is important, which it is important. There is a place for it. But it's the stuff that keeps us away from prospecting that really does slow things down. It slows the growth of your practice. It slows you getting, more clients and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to have a conversation about, is just busy work versus prospecting.
Yeah, it's slowing down your business by being stuck in busyness is what we're really looking at here.
Ooh, it's a good one. I like that. Yeah, and I think that it's important to probably open this up with just kind of being real and being like, okay, so this is an issue that I feel a lot of coaches have. I talk to a lot of coaches, and a lot of them have this problem. And I think that the root of it could be for a number of reasons. Maybe one, they're just not sure how to prospect. I think that's definitely a part of it. But I think a big part of it too is that there's probably just some sort of fear around actually reaching out. We actually did a podcast episode, I don't know, 2 years ago, something like that, called FORO, which is, instead of FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, FORO is the fear of reaching out, right? So we did a podcast episode on that, but that was probably like 2 years ago. And I think that it does have a lot to do with that. It's intimidating sometimes to reach out to people, especially people that you don't really know or that you've only known a little bit, and talk about a topic that's so personal, such as money.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet at the same time, we want to feel like we're doing something. We would hate to be called on the carpet and say, well, the only reason you're not successful is because you're not doing enough. And so we find ways to fill in the gaps and do things that really aren't serving what it is that we're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those things could be a number of things. It could be updating your website. It could be, thinking about different exercises that you could do, or, making your budget template a little bit more user friendly. It could be, starting up a Facebook group, or trying to post within that Facebook group, or trying to get people to be a part of that Facebook group. It could be, potentially just like being guests on podcasts, which, hey, there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, but that could be another thing. It could be a number of things that just kind of distract you. All those like little things that are important. And it's important to do to fine tune your craft. It's important to do to make sure that the product that you're offering and the service that you're offering is at its best, best level. But it's also those things where it's like, well, if you put so much time and so much energy into those things, what's the point if you don't have anyone to provide it to? And that's the disconnect that I see happen for a lot of people, a lot of coaches.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that, because you started to say, like, what are some of the reasons that this happens? And you mentioned FORO. I think another piece of why this happens is just personality. I hear those planes coming again, so I apologize. But yeah, the personality in general, if you're a very creative person, or, you're a little bit ADD-ish, sometimes I just repeat myself by saying those two things. You want to start something and you're maybe in creation mode, you're like really excited about it. And to your point, it's like, you can create all these things, but if you don't have anybody to give them to, what good is it? And so just being able to take a step back and go, what parts of this is just me, compensating for maybe some of that FORO, or what part of it is personality, or just kind of how I'm built as an individual, and where can I make some of those behavioral shifts so that I can actually do more of the things that are going to bring me what I'm actually after.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any behavioral shifts in particular that you think might be helpful?
Oh, that's what I get for giving myself that,
that's right.
that setup. I had not necessarily prepared for that question. But I guess we can go ahead and go there. It happens just like with any other change that we're trying to make. We want to make sure we're looking for patterns where we're seeing that type of thing happen. So if you recognize that, every certain, I don't know if it's a time of day or if it's something that happens ahead of it. But if you realize, I'm going to go and check on Facebook and see if there's something there, or I need to make sure that I'm doing, updating my website, some of those things that you mentioned, it would be a good idea to just take a step back and go, what thought was happening right before then? Why am I not doing this other thing over here? What just came to mind? Or if you're not quite sure what your thought patterns are yet, check in with how you're feeling about something. What emotion happened for you? Was it that fear, like you said, the fear of reaching out? Was it boredom? Was it something that, I don't know, what are some other examples of emotions that tend to come up from people? Anxiety around actually talking to somebody. Just kind of find out if there are some patterns around that. And then if you can identify that emotion, then we can kind of take a step back and go, what was the thought around that? And if it's something about, anxiety about reaching out with somebody, maybe the thought is that nobody wants what I have to offer, or everybody's going to say it costs too much, or there are several different examples we could use, but find out what that example is and what is that thought, and then kind of go from there so we can re-engineer that thought and move forward from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it almost sounds like a lot of it could be some form of like imposter syndrome. So, like you mentioned, like people say, oh, well, nobody wants what I have to offer. Or am I actually good at this? Or, will someone actually pay me for this? Who am I to charge someone? Like all that kind of stuff. I think that definitely is a big thing that's wrapped up in the hesitation for people to actually take that step and start conversations with people.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And part of the re-engineering of that is to start a conversation and prove yourself wrong. And so that kind of goes to what you were talking about. We actually saw this in our Facebook group that you think you mentioned at the top of this episode. And the number that somebody had put in there was 10%. You're doing all this busyness and only 10% of your day ends up being prospecting. And I'll tell you, when I read that, I was like, I'll bet there are many, many people in this group where not even 10% of their day or their time, their business time is dedicated to prospecting. And a lot of that is because of all of the things that we've talked about. So if you are wanting to establish a better way of thinking about something, you want to debunk, if you will, some of those negative thoughts or the unproductive thoughts that you have, you actually will try something to prove yourself wrong. So you want to, if you're doing 0 to, 5% of your day is prospecting, and if you're just stuck in fear, it's probably pretty much 0% is what you're actually doing. Then go ahead and just try 1 or 2, and you'll find that the results from that will likely not be as bad as what you had thought that they were going to be. And it can start to shift the way that you're feeling about that. You'll feel a little bit more empowered when you get a maybe versus a no, or something like that along those lines.
Yeah. And I think that just the idea of prospecting, I think that what we've talked about so far is maybe like why people haven't done it, right? Or maybe they're not doing it maybe as much as they could, or maybe even should. But I think that it's important to also talk about why it's so important to do it. So even like in my practice, I'll be honest with you. If we take out the time that I'm actually on either a call with a prospect, meaning like a consultation, or I'm on a call with a client, if we were to take that time away and we look at the rest of my day, it's pretty much 80% of the time that I'm spending is on some form of prospecting. The other 20% is filled with all those busy work kind of things, like refining certain things, brainstorming on new ideas, stuff like that. But 80% of my time, aside from actually like being on the phone with someone, is for prospecting. So that kind of looks like somewhere between, I would say minimum 2 hours a day, sometimes up to 4 hours a day of just shooting people messages, calling people, whatever it might be, just to, get them on a scheduled phone call for a consultation, to then have that consultation and then hopefully convert them into clients. And it's important to have that, because like that's the old like 80-20 rule kind of thing, where it's like, 80% of your results are going to come from 20% of your actions kind of thing. And there's a lot to do running a business. There's a lot of things that you can do, and there's a lot of things to think about, to, build all these different types of things. And that's all important. But again, 80% of your results are going to come from 20% of your actions. And that 20%, in my opinion, would be the prospecting. So again, it's important to do this, and it's important to set time aside for this, because this is the thing that actually makes your business be a business. Like, if you don't have anyone to offer this service to, then what's the point of having the business kind of thing?
Right.
I think that's the important side to really think about and consider when you're wrestling with the thought of, well, I know this is important, but I really don't want to do it. Well, it's like, you have to do it if you want to have clients.
Yeah. If I could, I'd like to talk a little bit about stretching your comfort zone. You had mentioned that, when you're talking about the different things that you do to prospect, you mentioned messaging, you message being on the phone, you kind of threw all of those together. And I would encourage our listeners today, if you are really good at quote unquote, just messaging or being on the computer, and that's something where you're trying to keep your focus, remember that it might be a good idea to stretch that comfort zone a little bit and ask yourself, if I'm not getting the results that I want right now, maybe it's because I'm actually using that as part of the busyness. So even though it's considered prospecting, it has turned into one of those busy activities because you're not taking that next step to then also reach out via phone or voice in some way and connect with somebody on a different level. What do you think about that, Cody?
I agree. So for example, I run Facebook ads, and basically like the ads get, if someone signs up for my Facebook ad, they'll basically get access to like a free webinar, and then they can watch the webinar. It's like 45 minutes. And if they want to book a call, they can do that on that page. And, some people do that, but there's a lot of people who watch the webinar. They kind of like, digest things, and they'll never really book a call. But one of the requirements that I have when signing up for the said webinar is providing 3 pieces of information: your name, your email, and your phone number. So every time that someone signs up for this webinar, I will text them and just say, hey, saw you signed up for this. Just wanted to make sure that was correct. And then they'll respond and, blah, blah, blah. We'll have a conversation, and eventually it'll lead to them booking a call with just me talking to them via text, right? And I have a series of text messages because not everyone responds to that first message. In fact, I would say most people don't respond to that first message. So then I'll shoot them a follow-up message that just says, hey, didn't hear back from you. Just want to make sure you were able to watch it okay. Sometimes people click out of it and they lose the link or it expires. So I'd be happy to send you the link directly that doesn't expire, blah, blah, blah. Some people respond to that. Some people don't. And if they don't respond to that, then I'll say, hey, also, I have this other resource, which is a lead magnet that I thought might be helpful to you. If you want it, let me know and I'll shoot it over to you. And sometimes people respond to that, and sometimes people don't. And if they get through those first 3 messages and they still haven't responded, I will give them a call. Or if they have an iPhone, which I love iPhones because I have an iPhone, I'll shoot them a voice message. Right. And I'll just say, hey, just wanted to give you a ring, wanted to shoot you a voice message and just see if you were getting my messages, see if you had interest, see if you needed anything, blah, blah, blah. Wanted to learn a little bit more about you. Happy to help any way I can, whatever it might be. And if for some reason they still don't respond to those, then I'll shoot them one last message and just say, hey, I think I'm going to let this go. Last thing I want to do is bug you about this. I was just hoping to give you a little bit more value, a little bit more support. But I don't want to bug you. So I'll leave the ball in your court. If you are interested in that, let me know. I'd be happy to help. So, after the initial touch point of that webinar or that lead magnet, I guess you could say, there's literally 5 different layers of follow-up before I finally just let it go, Yeah. And hey, it's a little bit time consuming. It's not taking me forever. And I have to be consistent with it, but that's where I get most of my clients is through the follow-up, and the direct outreach. In fact, I would say probably 90% of my clients come from that.
Love it. One thing I want to point out is the systemization that you just laid out. You obviously have systematized your follow-up, and I'm curious to know, has it always been that organized, or is that something that you had to sort of create as you became more and more committed, I'll use that word, to your coaching business?
I would say that I've always been consistent in knowing the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes from my background of being a concert promoter. Like, I just know that like people need to either see or be in touch with several times before they actually decide to buy something. So for, with the concerts, it was buying a ticket to the show kind of thing. So I just knew that was important. So from the very beginning of my coaching practice, I was being consistent with follow up and reaching out. But as far as like, you knock on the door at first, just wanted to make sure you got that right. Then you follow up and say, didn't hear back from you. Maybe you got busy and forgot to respond. Just wanted to see. Then the next one would be an offer of another free resource. Then the next one would be a call or a voicemail, or a voice message. And then the next one would be a, hey, I'm going to let this go, balls in your court kind of thing. That system was something that I had to learn by trial and error and see like what works, the level of like people actually responding to said messages and the order of them and stuff like that. That was something that took me, I would say probably about a year to really get like fine tuned. But now that I have it fine tuned, it's like you mentioned, it's a beautiful system and I do it every single day. And because of that, it yields really good results as well.
That's awesome. I like a lot that you brought information and experience from a previous career. I'd say it was a career, right? To your coaching business. And we're able to really use that to say, here's what I know, here's what I can tweak, and here's how I can apply it to this business to make it even that much greater. So I just love how there's all these little lessons within the lesson that we're trying to talk about today. So I appreciate you sharing that piece of it for sure. For anybody who's listening, I'm curious to know, you already broke down some percentages about how much time you spend prospecting versus doing some of the other stuff. For those who are curious, what would you say would be like a percentage breakdown? And I know you didn't prepare for this, so just, generalize it for what types of prospecting you do within your prospecting. So for example, how much of it is actually voice messages versus just a lot of emails that are already kind of pre-scripted versus some of the text messages that maybe you're doing some cut and paste, but are a little bit more personalized that you've had to put a little extra time into?
Sure. So I would say that 10% is email.
Okay.
I would say that 30% are just like the copy paste messages, whether it be through
like
Facebook,
text messages,
whatever it might be, but just copy paste. I just change their name kind of thing. I would say that 50% would be actually just having conversations with people through text messages after they respond and, acknowledging what they say, asking another question, acknowledging what they say, asking another question, and then offering a call. So that's probably about 50% of what I do. Okay. And then the other 10% would be me shooting a voice message, calling them, blah, blah, blah. And the reason that that's 10% is because a lot of the times it's just that 30 to 50% of copy paste text messages and then having a conversation. That's where the bulk of it actually comes to,
Sure.
Where I don't really need to call people because I've already, gotten them on the phone or had a conversation with them at some point.
Sure. Yes. Okay. And so one other takeaway I'd like to make sure that we just kind of throw out to our listeners is the idea of one behavior change that we can make. And you mentioned that a little bit earlier. And so I would say start small, but start. So if you are doing zero prospecting, then maybe just dedicate 15 minutes in a day, 3 days a week. Start small. And maybe that's going to depend on how much of your business are you wanting to do? How much are you a part-time worker or are you a full-time worker? Do take those things into account, but also take into account what you're doing right now. Because if you're doing nothing and then you try to commit to an hour a day for the next, 5 days a week, chances are that's not going to actually happen and you're going to get scared of it and you're not going to start at all. So what we want to do is find something that you're willing to do as a no matter what and just start. Mm-hmm. So let's just, for this example, use 15 minutes in a day for 3 days a week. And I would say mark down or keep track of what those certain things are that you're doing. So I would do a mixture of things. I wouldn't just do all text messages or all Facebook messages. I would mix it up a little bit, kind of like Cody mentioned. Maybe do one email, maybe do, a message that you can send out to people. And if you're feeling really good about yourself, maybe do a phone call. That's a good start. Just do something, mix it up a little bit. And then again, keep track of the results so you can know moving forward what's working, what am I not feeling comfortable with, where can I stretch that comfort zone. And by the way, I used that term a couple times today. I just want to explain why, because I think oftentimes when we say get out of your comfort zone, that it's scary as hell to think about that. But also, I think it's more realistic when we say we're actually wanting to become more comfortable with a greater amount of things. So what we're doing is we're stretching the amount of comfort that we have. So that's where that whole thing comes from. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I think that tracking, stretching that comfort zone, and just making sure you start somewhere are going to be 3 really good first steps.
Mm-hmm. And I want to just double down on that and say, you should absolutely schedule this into your schedule.
Yeah, great point.
Absolutely. Whether it be 15 minutes, whether it be an hour, I don't care. But just like how you schedule time to meet with a client, you should also schedule time to prospect as well.
I agree with that.
Because if you don't do that, it's gonna fall through the cracks. You're gonna get busy with other things and you're gonna push it to the side. So literally schedule it into your day. That's exactly what I do. For example, this morning I had prospecting from 8:30 to 9:30. Then I went on a sales call. Then I had prospecting from 11:30 to 12:15. Then I went and looked at some rental properties. Then I came back, had lunch, did another hour of outreach or prospecting. And now here I am recording a podcast. And after this podcast, I'm going to meet with 2 clients and I'm going to call it a day. So there was 3 different scheduled times for me to sit down, make my initial rounds, then sit down again, follow up with people, respond to people, go out and do a couple things, come back, do the same thing, maybe start a new conversation, and then record this podcast, have a couple clients, and then do the same thing tomorrow, kind of thing. Yeah. So schedule it into your day so you actually do it.
Yep. And then the only thing I'll even add to that is one extra layer. And that's Cody's obviously really, really good at this already. It's like he's old hat, right? And he knows what he's doing when he just has in his calendar an hour of prospecting. If you're new at this or not quite as, it's not quite as natural for you, feel free to also say what that means. Like, what are you going to do in that 15 minutes rather than just saying the broad prospecting?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Cool.
This has been good.
Good conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Necessary. Thank you to our incredible group who brought it up.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So with that being said, again, if you want to have conversations like this, join the group. Again, it's the Financial Coaches community by New Money Habits. Got a lot going on in there and it's growing every week. So definitely check that out. But we're going to wrap this up for today. Thanks again for listening. Catch you guys next week for another episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast. Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching. Music provided by Summer School.